Great. Got it. Well, yeah, like I said, we're so excited to see your interest in the boot camp. I just wanted to give you a brief background on where this came from. So Philip has done so much work in this area and helping people get started with digital news startups. And he really saw a hole in the field for folks who wanted to understand more about it. And on the Lion side, we really believe in the independent information ecosystem, and we believe that a robust ecosystem is good for communities. It's good for democracy. It's good for all sorts of societal goods. And so we created this program to really give folks the tools, the support, and the guidance they needed to launch. And everyone knows their community's best. Everyone knows their community's information needs best. And we wanted to support that. We're really excited. This is the second time we've run it. The first time was really successful, and 24 news businesses came out of that program. And we're really excited to run it again and are excited at your interest. Philip's going to talk a little bit now about sort of what the boot camp entails.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. It's amazing to see so many folks. And I think some familiar names, actually. I've seen names pop up. I'm like, oh, I think that we've crossed paths before. We've emailed, or maybe I've seen you in either the Lion Slack or the Gather Slack or in some other context. So that's great. Thanks for joining. I mean, I think I'll try and keep it pretty short because we're just keen to get your questions. And I think that Cassie's got a way to collect those questions as we go, but feel free to drop them in the chat as well if as a temporary solution if need be. But yeah, long story short, I left a startup newsroom that was based in Vancouver, Canada, and I think 2018, if I'm not mistaken, to head down to Stanford to do a fellowship, a journalism fellowship. And my objective in that fellowship was to really try and understand how it might be possible to create more versions of that newsroom, that startup newsroom that I'd left. And the startup newsroom that I'd left started as basically a 1/2 person newsroom back more than 15 years ago. The editor of a paper in Vancouver was fired for his editorial opinions. And he thought, well, I'm just going to do this new thing that people are doing. I'm going to start a blog. And he found a colleague in Michelle Hoare, who became the publisher of that very tiny newsroom. And 15 years later, it's now financially viable. It has about a dozen people on staff. Those two founding staff people, the founding editor and founding publisher, have moved on. So it's now run by two millennial women, and the newsroom staff is generally a lot younger. And it's generating more than $1 million a year to do important reporting. For that reason, reporting on education, reporting on healthcare, poverty, and so on. And so I saw that. I mean, I spent a decade there and got to see it from the inside. And I thought, how could this be reproduced? And that is the question that I took into that fellowship at Stanford. And what came out the other end, after interviewing more than 100 people who had started newsrooms, some who failed and a lot who succeeded, what came out the other end of all of that was a pilot of this boot camp that we're running. And so I ran a pilot, I believe it was at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, with just 5 people. And then thanks to COVID, in part, I was able to partner up with Lion and envision a much larger boot camp. And then Lion was able to partner up with Google News Initiative and make it a reality. And so we ran the kind of inaugural version of the boot camp last year, as Lisa mentioned, with 24 teams. It was roughly, I think, 30 people. And, I was just actually writing a blog post today about that experience and reflecting on, I don't know what is more amazing about this work, whether doing an 8-week immersion, which has got its own kind of incredible experience, not only for the participants, but for me to watch all of these projects come to life, but the ongoing coaching that we provide for a year after the program. So many of these projects in 8 weeks went from just an idea to launch. And that's really what the 8-week bootcamp tries to do, is it tries to take all of the participants from wherever they are, mostly unlaunched, to a moment where they're actually public. And they've kind of obviously thought through what they're making public. But then we continue to coach those projects for the next year and help them grow and ideally achieve moments of success, however they define that. And so that has also been an incredible journey to continue with those projects, to be able to coach them in an ongoing sense, and to, really share in their somewhat small but often enormous victories as they grow towards being financially viable, having big journalistic impact, and so forth. So yeah, that's kind of the motivation behind the bootcamp. And in a nutshell, the program is pretty minimalist. So we spend 8 weeks together. You spend that 8 weeks with me and 2 other coaches, as well as all the other participants in the program. We meet once a week as a group, and then we meet one-on-one. Either I'll meet with you or one of the other coaches will meet with you one-on-one each week. And we really try to keep the curriculum as, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of as, minimalist as possible, so that you're not kind of feeling overwhelmed with a ton of stuff that you need to wade through. We're just trying to do the minimum possible to get your idea moving forward at a pace where you can launch in 8 weeks. We do cover things like how to do basic financial planning. We are going to cover basics like how to register your business, or if you're thinking of nonprofit incorporation, we cover that too. But really the core, the kernel of the bootcamp is putting you into dialogue with your potential audience, readers, listeners, viewers, financial supporters, whether that be members or subscribers or sponsors or advertisers or what have you. So we really work to ensure that you're talking to those people, literally doing interviews with them, ensuring that what you're building in terms of a journalistic product or information product really meets a need that they have. And that's what we focus on, is just de-risking, taking as much risk out of your assumptions as possible, so that when you launch, you're launching with a very vetted, tested, defensible idea that ideally will make a mark in the market and find some traction with real readers, audience, subscriber, members, what have you. So yeah, that I think is probably the most concise summary I can give. And hopefully that was less than 7 minutes.
Thank you so much, Philip. Cassie, yeah, can you explain the retro board?
Perfect. Yes, I will go ahead and share my screen. And I dropped a link to the retro board in the chat, and just in a moment, you'll see what I've been talking about. So this is our easy retro board. If you hover over to this plus sign where my cursor is, you can just go ahead, type in a question and add it. And we have a pretty small group today. So, no question too small. Feel free to add a couple questions if you have them. I'm going to put like a quick timer on the clock just so we, keep track of time and give folks, I think 2 minutes should probably be sufficient to add any questions that you have to the board. If you're struggling with it, no worries, just drop those questions in the chat and I'm happy to pick those up and throw them in there for you. And the other thing you could do, you see this little thumbs up signs, you can hit those to vote for a question that you'd really like to see get answered, and it'll automatically, the board will sort by the most popular questions. That way we can prioritize if we run out of time. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little timer for 2 minutes. And I apologize in advance. I didn't think to have any elevator music for us while we.
I could supply some elevator music.
If you've got some music, that would be excellent. Otherwise, it's just the eerie silence of a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, let me see if I could share my sound more.
This is Philip's strength, is DJing the moment.
Yeah, if you are, lucky enough to be invited into the bootcamp, you will be rewarded with lots of Philip playlists and musical moments. There's a lot of dancing in the bootcamp.
Should add that to the FAQ. And I'm happy to read out the questions too, Philip and Lisa, but again, we're a small group. If somebody wants to claim a question or expand on it or just read it themselves, introduce themselves, feel free to shout me down. I love a Zoom with a lot of voices, so feel free to unmute, take over.
Well, this is Renata. I posted a couple of questions there, but I know that whoever posted about the Canadians was the first one on there. So I don't want to step on toes.
And I've tried to answer that one right in the
Okay.
card itself, because that is a very easy answer. So I'm going to defer to Cassie, but I would say go forth and ask your question. Or I can answer the Canadian one in one sentence if that's easiest.
Okay.
Cassie, how would you
So
like to?
the first question that I had was, I would really like to join Lion, and I perused all the membership pages and, well, almost all of the pages on the website, which are very interesting. And it seems like, or the way I interpreted it was that Lion is looking for newsrooms that have a little bit of experience. And then in another place I read, well, if you're new, this is a great place to come because we have lots of resources. But so I wasn't really sure, was like, if I'm a startup, I don't have experience, but I am a startup. But over here it says, like, it sounds like you want ones with experience. So if there could be some clarification on that, I'd appreciate it as far as membership.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that question on behalf of Lion. And yeah, we actually do have a tier of membership for aspiring entrepreneurs. And so that tier of membership is for folks who have an idea for a news business and want to launch within about a year, or if they've already kind of gotten started with an MVP and really haven't built up an audience yet. But the long story short is we absolutely have a space for folks who aren't established news businesses yet. And we love having aspiring entrepreneurs in the fold. It's in terms of like the practicalities of how it works, there's really no difference to what your experience in Lion is going to be. You get access to all the same resources. Really the biggest difference is it's cheaper. It's $50 for the year to be an aspiring entrepreneur. The application's a little different. And we, at the end of that kind of 1 year membership, we do ask that folks, have launched and or have moved past their kind of like MVP. But yeah, we absolutely do have space, and I'm happy to, once I've stopped sharing my screen, put a link to that in the chat. I'd be happy to get on a call to talk a little more if you'd like. And we'll also send out that information in a follow-up email. So
Okay,
short,
Cassie,
yes.
thank you.
Even better news is that if you are invited to join the boot camp, every boot camp participant receives that aspiring entrepreneur membership for free as part of their enrollment in the boot camp.
Perfect. Well, I'll go ahead and read these questions. And again, feel free to shout me down if you want to introduce yourself. But Philip, Lisa, how would you describe the types of journalism businesses this is for?
And take that one, Philip.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to. I was kind of writing about this today. It's for any journalism first or information first project. We do prioritize, or at least this year, putting more of an emphasis on kind of local/regional news projects and or projects that are kind of have a strong single subject/thematic thrust to them. So we really want to see an idea that it has some achievability within the 8 weeks in terms of being able to launch it. So it might be better to say what kinds of organizations might not be, or projects might not be a good fit. And typically those are, in our experience, ideas that want to reach, for example, other parts of the world. So maybe it's, it doesn't seem bound by any geography or theme in a kind of focused enough way for us to get our arms around it in 8 weeks. That tends to be not a great one. But in terms of business models, we cover for-profit, we cover nonprofit. We also touch on things like cooperatives or I'm going to forget the name of it now, kind of the ethical corporations. I can't remember the exact name. A moment, it's left my mind. But yeah, in terms of structures, we cover everything. And I would say, it's really, the boot camp is for people who are in a very early stage, often very much pre-launch, but often just idea stage. And so it's definitely for kind of solopreneurs or small teams that are trying to get an initial effort off the ground. Probably not a great fit for people who are trying to create the next ProPublica, where their mission is to raise $10 million in 8 weeks. That's going to be hard. So hopefully that answers it a bit. If there's any nuance to that question, feel free to unmute yourself and add to it so I can be really specific.
Going once? Okay,
Cool.
cool. And I see some stuff coming up in the chat, but it's hard while I'm sharing my screen. So Lisa or Philip, if you see anything.
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on it.
Cool. And okay, so the next question is, are you only looking for organizations that haven't started yet?
Well, what we're looking for is organizations that haven't started yet or have launched within the last year. So this isn't a program for a little bit more established organizations, or you've kind of been going for a while. This is very much kind of a launch pad style, if that helps answer it.
Yeah, and I think I'll add some nuance to that. I mean, I'll give you the perfect example of why. We talk about this in the first week of the boot camp, but I had the like the pleasure and the honor of doing an audit for a publisher here in the US who's been working at their project for 6 or 7 years now. It's a very niche project in a small area. And what I have found, and I've seen this and witnessed it so much that it's made its way into week 1 of the boot camp, is that when a person has been toiling away at an idea for 4 or 5 years, and at that point, they have not achieved the success that they're after, but they've invested 4 or 5 years of their life into it, it is almost impossible to convince that person that the idea might not work, because they're just emotionally invested beyond any kind of a immersion or course or boot camp like this to have an impact. So we're really looking for people who are at that point that they have an idea and they have an idea of what success is, and they are not so emotionally invested that they can be objective about their own idea, that they can apply their own natural skepticism to the idea so that they can make it defensible and ensure that they are not that person 5 years down the road that's invested their life savings and into a project that might not ever work. So hopefully that helps.
I'll also add that we have other programs available through Lion that are intended for businesses who've been going for a little bit longer and are working toward but have not yet achieved sustainability. Yes, this is very much intended for folks who are, just around the launch phase, but there are other opportunities.
If I could pipe up and claim that question, we've just started putting out original content, and I guess that was April, so within a year, but now a couple months deep. So
perfect. Yeah, we definitely had probably half. I believe we had half of the applicants, or sorry, half of the participants last year had already launched, but we're kind of within that 1 year window. Perfect. Yeah, it's a great moment because often you're still figuring things out, and you recognize that in your first year. Yeah, for sure.
Great. I see we have some people who just recently joined. We have a retro board going. You should be able to find it in the chat. Feel free to add questions there, throw them in the chat, and one of us can do that. So our next question is about platforms. Are you medium restricted, i.e. written word over audio, video, other formats? Do we have preferences?
0. I mean, I would love to see some really innovative new mediums come into the program. We had podcasts and written format projects mostly in the last cohort, although one of the projects that I was just writing about today, Queer and See, is almost at this point kind of Instagram first. And we had another one of the projects that kind of did a pivot and became a Clubhouse kind of first project. And so, I mean, so no restriction on the medium. Encourage people that are trying new mediums and formats. That's ideal in the bootcamp, because the bootcamp is very much about testing out your ideas.
Awesome. Okay,
although
next.
we do love the written word.
That bias is always there. Next question is, if my organization will be a nonprofit, will you provide assistance in finding board members, etc.?
Lisa, do you want to talk about that, or?
So the boot camp is really focused on getting you launched and experimenting and really talking with your audience. So you'll get a lot of support there, but in terms of like literally helping you find board members, that's not going to be part of it. We can provide, some information and some resources about like where to take it from there. And we'll also provide like a little bit of information about how to kind of get the nonprofity stuff started. But yeah, no, not board members.
Yeah, and I would say, well, I'd say a couple things. One is that we definitely talk about mapping your stakeholders. So I would say, no, there's no matchmaking service, like Lisa said, which is like, oh, you're based in Denver and we know these 3 people in Denver. But in terms of understanding the kinds of people that might make a good board member, you'll probably be talking to them during the boot camp. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Great. So next question is, what types of needs are you hoping the news idea business will meet?
Are you talking about like community needs?
If that person wants to claim this and expand on their question.
Or like information needs, I should say. Unclear. Well, I'll just talk a little bit about that. That's a big part of the boot camp sort of ethos and philosophy is, you may have a pretty good idea of what you think the information needs are for your audience, but you need to test those. You need to actually, talk to people and make sure that either your guess was correct or you'll need to pivot based on those actual audience interviews. So the news idea need will be sort of what your audience needs and will help you facilitate that process.
And if that didn't answer your question, feel free to jump in or follow up after. In the meantime, the next question is, what is the success rate after attending the boot camp and or 8 weeks class, or is it the same thing?
Mm. Yeah, so the boot camp is 8 weeks. It's actually 9 because we take a week off in the middle, but it is 8 weeks of curriculum. And the success rate, I mean, it really depends on how you define success. In terms of projects that are still active, we do a report every quarter on that. So as part of the coaching that we do for a year after, we just keep track of what stage people are at. So currently 6 months after the last boot camp graduated, basically more than 75%, more than 3/4 of the participants are still active. I believe that almost 50% of them are generating revenue. So, not everybody defines success in the same way. It's a little bit of a nuanced question, but I would say, our expectations aren't unrealistic. Things come up in people's lives. There's obviously we had a pandemic. There's family issues, health issues, people get offered other jobs and so forth. So I mean, we're not expecting that by any means that 100% are going to be successful. We just expect that everybody who's invited and chooses to join the boot camp gives it their 110%. That's our expectation. And then our commitment in return is that we're going to invest 110% in you through the program, through the coaching, and through any of the other supports that we can provide. And just to be, one thing that we really heard from the participants last year was that we should make it more evident or be more transparent about the fact that, this boot camp is not no cost. This boot camp is actually you investing in yourself a fair bit of time, number one, and Lion and Google investing in each one of the participants roughly $5,000. So it's kind of like taking a fairly, normal professional development course and making that investment in yourself in terms of making time for that. And so it's like a real, a lot of people are investing in you, and we just expect that everybody who gets in really takes that chance or opportunity to invest in themselves. And then success is however you define it.
I have a follow-up question to that, if I may. This is Renata again. So my reading of the guidelines for application, you can apply for these scholarships from Lion and several other organizations. But I sort of got the interpretation that is not necessarily you would be accepted for the scholarships, even if you're accepted for the boot camp. Is that correct, or am I misinterpreting?
No, there's some similar programs out there that have that kind of a situation. This isn't one of them. So anybody who gets accepted into the boot camp is not required to pay anything. It is, for all intents and purposes, free, with the caveats that I just said, that, you know, free kind of undersells it. It's actually like a huge investment on behalf of, you know, Google Online and yourself, but there's no hard cost to you. Yeah, if you're accepted in, for sure.
Great. And I just want to do a quick time check. Lisa, how are we doing? Good?
Yeah, so we're just about on the hour. If you do need to drop off on the hour, feel free. We're also super happy to stay here for an additional 15 minutes to make sure we get through all these questions.
And maybe why don't I can see a bunch that I can answer in 1 minute or less. So why don't I just jump down through those quickly, and then we can linger on any of the more complicated ones. So bootcamp dates, 100%. So the application deadline, Lisa will tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's August 1st. The bootcamp itself runs from September 7th. So there's a holiday that week. So I think it starts on maybe the Tuesday through to the week of November 9th. So it's roughly beginning of September to beginning of November or mid-November.
And to clarify, this is the US boot camp.
Yes, the US boot camp. The Canadian boot camp applications will open this fall. We don't have an exact date for the applications opening, but it will be in the fall. And it will start sometime in early 2022. That'll be 100% focused on Canada. And the reason we're separating it is because we had both Canadians and Americans in the last boot camp, and it's just tough to cover kind of how to register a business in both countries, and tax law in both countries, and specifics of journalism law in both countries. Not that we really go deep on some of those things, but it's just going to be easier to kind of have it specific to Canada. And acceptance rate, well, for the last boot camp, it was roughly 1 in 10. So I guess that would be like 10%. So yeah, but you know, I would say that there was almost nobody who applied who didn't tell us that the experience of applying itself was helpful. So definitely encourage you. It's a short application to go through the process, and just just take that opportunity to try and refine your thinking about your idea, literally in the written word, and put it down in an application. And I think those are all the easy questions.
Okay, we can start at the top then. And so this next question is it okay if we, as the creators, are the only writers, editors for our startup in the beginning stages?
Yeah, I can take that. Yes, it is. And in fact, that's pretty typical, which kind of gets at this next question, which is, do you want just one representative to participate in the boot camp, or would you accept more? So most folks are 1, maybe 2 people. And if you've got more than 2 people in your organization, up to 2 can participate in the boot camp if you're selected. So yeah, I hope that answers those ones.
Yeah, and we found that, you know, sometimes a team of 2 will trade off weeks to try and just balance out the workload. One thing I will say that wasn't asked here, but in terms of time commitment, just so everybody's aware who's still on, we asked for kind of a minimum of 8 hours a week. And so we asked for that minimum to, you know, try and balance the needs of people that are working a full-time job, or might have other heavy commitments like children, like I do, with kind of the reality that you need to put in a certain base level of time just to get through the kind of the homework each week that we're asking you to undertake. And so, you know, we definitely had people who participated at a very kind of like 8 hours a week level in the last cohort. And then we had other people that were working on it 40 hours a week. And we accommodate both. You're certainly going to get further along if you can invest more time. I mean, that just should be obvious.
And this next question is, what types of funding information is taught during the 8 weeks in reference to launching? So I assume that is related to fundraising efforts.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we do touch on a variety of ways in which journalistic startups bring in revenue, and we try and drill in to each of those to some degree. recognizing that there's 24 teams that are going to come at it quite differently. We don't dedicate like a whole week to nonprofit fundraising or fundraising for a nonprofit newsroom and a whole week to something else. We try and kind of at least conceptually cover the basics for most scenarios and then give you deep resources if you want to go further on those. But we definitely talk about how much funding you might need for a launch, and that most people probably believe it to be more than what's really needed. So we certainly encourage you not to be held back by a lack of funding, that's for sure.
Great. And this next question is, I started my brand and website with merchandise early on. Is there a percentage of news that is expected to define the business as a publication?
Good question. I'm going to have Lisa answer that one.
Yeah, that's a good question because it's a little bit tricky. I mean, if you're working with merch and you've got kind of a revenue stream already going on, that's great. We are expecting that sort of your primary function is to provide original information to your audience. So a couple of the sort of ineligible things would be if you are primarily an aggregator, so you're not creating original content, you're just gathering other content together. If you are an organization that primarily serves other news organizations, or if you have kind of like a product that you're, wanting to sell to, for example, journalism organizations. So I don't know what sort of percentage I would be able to put on that, but I guess I would just say that your primary function is to provide information, original information to an audience.
Good rubric. So I'll just jump on the next one just in the interest of time. Sorry, Cassie. The question is, do you provide all sorts of templates for ideas such as ad packages and other financial streams? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, if you're just looking to kind of get a bunch of templates, check out the GNI Startups Playbook. I think somebody's already posted a link in the chat because Lion's done an incredible job of pulling together a lot of resources and templates. Certainly join the Lion Entrepreneurship Slack community because there's even more shared in between news organizations there. But yeah, we do link to those resources in the bootcamp, and we talk about all the revenue streams that a newsroom might have or a information startup might have, and advertising is absolutely one of those. Yeah.
Okay, last question.
Wow.
I'll read it with a dramatic flair.
Yeah.
How do you work with startups? How do you work with startups to find product market fit?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Mhm.
I mean, at its core, that is what the bootcamp is about. And, at the end of the day, if I were to try and distill in that kind of startup lingo, what we do is we work with every founder that's in the program to help them find both what we call problem solution fit, which is a little earlier stage. So am I helping to solve a problem that people really have? And then if they can confirm that, then the next question is the market large enough to support this as a product, which is the product market fit part. And so we cover that latter half, product market fit, mostly through market research and then through interviews to ensure that there is, there are people in that market that are willing to accept or buy the offer of the product. And we use a variety of different tools and tactics. I kind of come out of the school of Ash Maria, who wrote Running Lean. He's my mentor. I'm a certified Lean Stack coach, which is Ash Maria's kind of coaching program. And so we do pull a lot on the Lean Startup kind of playbook and a lot from Ash's material about how to do product market fit exercises. But the primary tool that we use in the bootcamp is interviews. We will use worksheets. We will use market research. We will use other kind of research tools, like whether it be Google Ads, using those as a research proxy, or using Facebook Audience Insights as a proxy. But we really do try and make sure that the market is large enough that if you were able to attain a tiny percentage of it, you could create a viable enterprise. Hopefully that answers the question without too much detail.
Great. Does anyone have a question they just want to shout out right now, or a clarification or anything like that? All right. Well, we hope you all apply. We would love to hear about your ideas. I put a link to the application in the chat. We will also be holding additional information sessions. If something comes up and you really want to know more about it, you're also free to reach out to me and email me. My email, I'll put it in the chat in just a moment. It's just lisa@lionpublishers.com. And with that, we really appreciate your joining us today. And yes, we hope to hear more from you soon.
Yeah, it's great to see so many familiar names on the call. So please, yeah, reach out with any questions, and excited to see your applications.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.